Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome back. We are learning today about the modern day mitzvahs. Remember, out of the 613 mitzvahs in the Torah, only a certain amount of them are relevant to be able to be fulfilled during the times of exile. Thank you to Rabbi Uzval who filled in for me while I was away the past couple of days. But those mitzvahs are 77 positive mitzvahs, active mitzvahs, and a grand total of 167, is that what it was? No, 194. 194 negative. Yeah, 194 plus 70. What was that?
194 negative.
Yeah, 194 passive mitzvahs. It's not even a negative. It's just something that you don't do. I mean, how hard is it to not to do? You just don't do 194 things, and you're doing all the mitzvahs. You just don't do them, right? 77 plus 194, I think, is 260 something, right? 194 plus 77, whatever, 266, I think. 271. Okay, fine. So it's 271 mitzvahs that are all the mitzvahs that we are able to fulfill today, and we're going through them. Good morning, Ed Hockman. So let's go through them. We're up to mitzvah number 18, and the mitzvah is to have a reverent fear of the sanctuary. Again, I don't like the word fear. You're supposed to be afraid of the sanctuary. I don't even know what that means. You're supposed to have awe and reverence. Interesting, in biblical times, what happened was that there was an honor guard around the temple. An honor guard around the temple, and what happened was that it wasn't there for protection, just like you do for a dead person. When a person dies, you have to have a shomer, a guard, not because we're afraid that someone's going to attack the dead person, God forbid, but as a honor guard, when somebody's special, right? It's something special, reverence, right? Same thing in the temple, that 24 hours a day, there was an honor guard around the temple, and there was a person in charge of the honor guards. He would go around with a flame, with a torch. He would walk around and do the rounds. And the protocol was that the guard needed to, as soon as he saw the supervisor coming towards him, he was supposed to greet him, Shalom Alecha, greetings to you, guard. And if he didn't initiate the greeting, then what does that mean? It means he was dozing off. And if he was dozing off, then the supervisor had permission to set his clothes on fire. Talking about putting a fire to his feet, eh? Right? That's going to keep him awake. Right? So that is the biblical command to be reverent of the sanctuary. Let's learn about it in the actual original. As Scripture states, and have reverence towards my sanctuary. Now, our synagogues and houses of Torah study are called mikdash me'at, little sanctuaries. As Scripture states, yet have I been to them as a little sanctuary. We have to beware in them from any frivolous laughter or levity or any idle talk. No calculations are to be reckoned there, nor are they to be slept in. That's the problem for the sermon. Their holiness is very severe. This mitzvah is enforced everywhere at every time for both man and woman.
Now, what's considered the sanctuary?
That's a very interesting question. So what is the sanctuary? So clearly we know the biblical sanctuary in Jerusalem. We know the sanctuary of this week's Torah portion, which is the Mishkan, the tabernacle that Moses built in the desert. What else do we know? We know that every shul in the world is a miniature sanctuary. But there's a difference between a Beit Knesset and a Beit Medrash. You know what a Beit Knesset means? Beit Knesset means a house of prayer. A house literally translates as a house of gathering. But if a room is designated for prayer exclusively, then it has a higher sanctity than if it's designated for prayer and study, like this shul, and like most shuls in the world. In a house of prayer, you're not allowed to eat. You're not allowed to have frivolous conversation. You're not allowed to sleep. You're not allowed to do anything. But in a house which is also for learning, it's much more lax. Nevertheless, you still have to be mindful of the sanctity of the place. You can't just put your feet up, and just, burp and be disrespectful. You're in the house of Hashem. Also, there's a special law called Me'ilah, which means desecrating or violating the property of God. So just in the same way that you're not allowed to violate an animal offering which has been designated hekdesh, as sanctified as holy, because you're stealing from God. So too, if you deface shul property, you also are violating a biblical command. You can't just take a prayer book and throw it on the floor, or just rub chocolate on a chair in a shul, because if you do that, you're defacing sanctified property. It's hekdesh, and every donation that you make to the shul is also considered sanctified. Right, so there's a reverence associated with the sanctuary. It's good. Does that apply to reform shuls?
I guess they have Torahs, I guess. Come on, I think don't go there.
Am I allowed to abstain?
No, you can't abstain. You cannot abstain. You're right.
But ask my attorney to respond for me.
I'm a student. I'm going to teach abstain from actually.
I mean, they have Torahs.
Let me say this. I'm going to keep it on the positive. I'm going to keep it on the positive. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say in the positive. Every house which is devoted to all of the 613 mitzvahs, without exclusion, falls into the category of a mikdash. You decide. You make your own conclusion. I don't know. What do I know? So, like you just said, you really answered the question. You said, how do you know? That's what you said, right? So how do we know? How do we know what the question was posed, Daniel? I just want to welcome everybody. Elaine, good morning. Terry from Atlanta. Garrett, it's working this morning because yesterday my computer battery died, so I apologize. Daniel Geiker, Corey's asking a question about dogs being allowed in shul. It's a very interesting question. We'll talk about that in a second. But I just want to say that you answered the question, Marty, yourself, when you said, how do you know? And that's really my answer. How do you know? Assuming any building, I don't know. You asked about Reform. I don't know about Orthodox. I don't know what I don't believe in labels. So if someone is committed to the values of Torah exclusively without any ifs, ands, or buts, that's a house of God. But if they say, let me ask you, what about a Messianic temple? A temple which is like a Jews for Jesus. Would that be considered? Well, I don't think they keep all the values of Torah. I mean, I know that they don't because they believe in idolatry. So therefore they would be excluded. Any sanctuary that doesn't keep to the full values of Torah, right, would be excluded from that category. And it doesn't matter which label you slap upon it, right? To answer your question, Corey. So the question about dogs in shul. That's definitely a judgment call. Dogs in shul. No, the question is posed from Corey about dogs in shul. Good morning, Winston. If it's a need, a dog which is needed, then it should be allowed. It should be allowed. I'm talking about like a blind dog. That would be certainly. The problem is when you have your. Yeah, exactly. The question is when you have like your Komodo dragon for emotional support, or your pet cow for loneliness. That's when things are gonna get a little hectic. We were on the plane the other day and somebody had Hannah can't handle dogs. So there was a dog right next to her. I commend her. She was very brave. She sat next to an emotional support dog. The problem was he sat next to an emotional support. Like what do they call those greyhounds? They're huge. They're huge. So I think we're starting to push the limits over here in our show. We have a mezuzah, and we almost have a minion of dogs here sometimes. We're already 3 dogs sometimes. It's getting a little much. We're considering an addendum to the Kiddush. We're thinking of adding pet food, dog food. But we have already started to make requests in private to people to be a little bit more sensitive to other people that have an emotional aversion to 4-legged creatures, right? So we're trying to push that a little bit more carefully. Anyways, that's the answer to my question. Your question. Let's go further. Number 19. It is what was that? The Yidden. It is an I think even JetBlue put limits on it now. I think they said that because they had a real problem with emotional support pets, So it's bringing like the emotional support pony onto their plane. It takes 4 seats, what to do with it.
The wedding this time. The mother of the groom, that I was told she needs an emotional support dog with her.
Right.
And I had big dogs. I had one of these mountain dogs, which were big. She
Yeah.
had the Great Dane.
A Great Dane.
The dog was taller than me.
Yeah.
On his horse.
You have to look up to this guy. Yeah. Okay. Unless the dog needs an aliyah, says Corey. I agree, especially coming up to the bima. Yeah, we don't allow dogs onto the bima unless he needs an aliyah. If he needs an aliyah, then you have to speak to Steve, ritual committee.
Mickey says it's okay if they had a bar mitzvah.
If they had a bar mitzvah, there you go. All right, good. Number 19, it is a positive commandment to declare the Shabbos holy with words. This is interesting. To declare the Shabbos holy with words. You have to verbalize it. For scripture says, remember the Shabbos day to keep it holy. And the sages of blessed memory said, hallow it with words. What does that mean? How do we hallow the Shabbos with words? By saying Kiddush. You have to say the Kiddush. It's not enough to say, I'm a good Jew in my heart. I exercise, Rabbi, in my heart. Nobody exercises in their heart, right? I make money in my heart. Hello? That doesn't pay the bills. FPL doesn't accept that excuse, right? So why should God, right? You can't, it's not enough to say that I remember the Shabbos in my heart. You got to do it with your hands and your feet. In this case, you got to do it with your lips. And that's how we have to sanctify the Shabbos with that verbal affirmation at the beginning of Shabbos by saying Kiddush, and at the end of Shabbos by saying Havdalah.
Rabbi, is that the reason why Chabad lighting the candle bracha is different than everybody else's? Use the word HaKodesh at the end?
It's not the difference, but might be related to the difference. So other groups of Jews, they say, help me out here. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu tzavanu tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. That's it, right? And we say lahadlik ner shel Shabbat Kodesh. That probably is the reason. You know what? You're right. Because by saying Shabbat Kodesh, which means the holy Shabbos, what have you done? You verbally affirmed the sanctity of the Shabbos. That's actually probably exactly the answer. I never thought of that. Thank you for pointing that out. So hello with the words on her. You light the candles? Oh shit, that's very good. Well, that's a very good point for everybody that's listening. If you haven't, if your wife, lighting Shabbos candles is a mitzvah which is incumbent primarily upon the woman. Do you know why? Because the woman extinguished the light of the world when she fed Adam the tree of knowledge and bringing mortality to the world. Therefore, she has to make up for it every Friday by lighting the light of Shabbos. Very interesting Kabbalistic reason. However, if the woman is not available, then the obligation, the onus falls upon the husband. So for example, if my wife is in New York or somewhere else, I will light the Shabbos candles at home because the obligation is upon the home where you are residing, not just on the family unit. You can't say, well, where she is, she's lighting. No, the house has to have the Shabbos candles, right?
This is a perfect example. Perfect example in learning how much we learn from a question.
Oh, perfect example of how much we learn from a question. Beautiful. Love it. That's what we have. That's what we have. It's a great group. Gary wants to know, what about an emotional support piglet? I think we need to have an emotional support committee to figure out
You're in charge. Tell him he's chairman.
the applications. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hallowed with words and its rival with Kiddush, the benediction of the sanctification, and its departure with Havdalah, the benediction of separation. And here's where I would love to be able to inspire you, if you don't do it yet already, to implement the Kiddush in your home. I don't know what goes on in most people's homes on a Friday night because I'm not normally there. But if you don't do it already yet, then turn Friday night into Shabbos. How do you do that? Turn off the TV before sundown, light the candles before sundown, Shabbos afternoon, and then make Kiddush. Put out 2 challahs on the table. You can get the kosher challahs in Publix, get kosher wine, and make the Kiddush. If you don't know the Kiddush, you can. It's available online and in the booklet. It's available in English transliteration. And you just say Yom Mashishi Vaycholu Ashmayim V'Aretz V'Chol Tzevam. You just say the words, and you bless the wine, and you sit down. And it's actually an amazing experience to have a meal with your family without any smartphones. It's actually possible. It is possible to have a meal where you only look at each other to talk instead of texting. And it's an amazing experience. You put away the phones and you make Friday night sanctified. Can you imagine doing this with your grandkids when they come to visit? You say, in Bubby and Zadie's house, there's no smartphones on a Friday night. There's no TVs, right? And that's a special, it's called family time. Something from the olden days, right? It's an amazing experience. And you sanctify the words of Shabbos. What we're doing now with our Bar Mitzvah training, we started a new thing, is that we're actually teaching the Bar Mitzvah boys to say the Kiddush together with the haftarahs. We're teaching them the Kiddush as well because we figure the haftarah is going to serve them once, but the Kiddush is going to serve them every Friday night of their lives to be able to bring Yiddishkeit to their homes, not only to their shuls. Right? So it is a law of the sages to recite the Kiddush over wine or over bread. So what happens if you don't have wine? You make Kiddush over bread. And when you reach the part of the wine, instead of saying Baruch atah Hashem v'kinu melech haolam b'rei gaf, and you say Baruch atah Hashem v'kinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and you're blessing the bread. It's not about the wine. It's about the Shabbos. The Shabbos is being sanctified, not the wine. How do you sanctify the Shabbos? What you do is you take something special. You sanctify it over the most precious liquid out there. What's the most expensive drink in the world? Is wine. Right? I don't think there's anything more expensive than wine to drink. I mean, wine. You know, you wouldn't pay $1,000 for orange juice, but you'd pay $1,000 for wine. 2,000. Okay, fine, 2,000. And then, but bread is also why bread if you don't have wine? Because bread is the most important food, right? So the most important beverage and the most important food. And it is likewise a law of the sages to recite the Havdalah at its departure over wine or some other drink, which is an accepted beverage in that region. If you don't have wine, you can use beer or even coffee. It is forbidden to taste anything before Kiddush or Havdalah. Now, that's a very interesting law. You're not supposed to taste any food before Kiddush or Havdalah. This really motivates you to do the mitzvah. When you realize Friday sundown, I'm not allowed to eat anything until I make Kiddush, until I make Havdalah on a Saturday night, makes you do it. You know, a lot of mitzvahs are like that. You're not allowed to taste anything before Hanukkah candles. You're not allowed to taste anything before checking for chametz, right? Because if you start tasting, you get the appetizer. Soon you'll be in the entree. You'll be snoring by the time you're, by the time you realize that you didn't check the candles. They didn't light the candles, right? You understand Kiddush? You don't understand Havdalah. What do you mean? What don't you understand? Saturday night, from sundown, you're not allowed to taste any food until you make Havdalah after nightfall. Now remember, we have our Chabad calendars, which have the Friday night candle lighting time and the Saturday night exit time. Friday night candle lighting time is the time you have to light the candles before that time. You actually have 18 minutes from the time on the calendar. So the time on the calendar is actually 18 minutes before sunset. So technically, you shouldn't push the envelope, but you do have 18 minutes. If it says 5 p.m., you have until 5:18. But you're playing with fire, right? Literally. So that's one thing. On a Saturday night, you can't do Havdalah before the end of Shabbos, which is the time printed on the calendar. One last thing is that you can really find this. I just want, for the purposes of anybody watching here, I just want to tell you where to find this in the Blue Prayer Book. If you want the Kiddush, 298. Oh, okay. So let me start with the Kiddush a second. The Kiddush you'll find in the prayer book. It's real nice and easy. You'll find it in the prayer book on page 100 and here 179. 179 is the Kiddush. Okay, Zikaron, she's right, and it says here when making Kiddush of wine, glance at the wine and say. When making Kiddush of the bread, say as follows. Now, Corey's asking an interesting question. Corey wants to know if you're making Kiddush and bread, when do you wash? Right? That's your question, Corey, right? Do you wash first or is the Kiddush enough? The answer is obviously you have to wash. Let me see over here. It's actually a little note here on page 604 in the book. 1 second, bear with me. One who does not have wine or grape juice or is unable to drink the appropriate amount of wine for Kiddush may recite Kiddush over the challah with the following procedure. Here goes, Corey. First, wash the hands and say the blessing al natilas yadayim. Before Kiddush, wash hamotzi, wash for the bread, and 3 on the right and 3 on the left, and then you make the blessing al natilas yadayim. Then place both hands on the covered chalas when they dry, and you say Yom HaShishi. Uncover the challah when you reach the blessing. You say Savrim Ernan, Baruch atah Hashem v'kinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. The same way that you'd raise the cup of wine when you make the blessing agafen, you uncover the challah, and then cover the challah again, place both hands on the cover challahs, and recite the blessing of Uncover the challah and take a bite. That's how you do it, okay? So the Kiddush is on page 179. Now, Steve, you said the Havdalah was where? 278? 298. Okay, so Havdalah you'll find on page 297, actually. 297. There's a transliteration in English letters on 635. It's interesting. The Kiddush here is not transliterated in our siddur, probably because Harvey was singing it along moments ago. A lot of people know it. But 297, which is the Havdalah, you'll have to find the transliteration if you don't read Hebrew, which is on page 635 in the prayer book. So it's all here. And if you don't have this prayer book, by the way, you can just buy it from the shul office with pleasure. Just call the shul office and they have it here for you. Okay, so it's all here. It's nice and easy. No big deal. Okay? Yeah?
When we do Friday night services here, we do all kinds.
Now, we do that before nightfall. Before yeah, so now you're not supposed to daven. So you're not supposed to eat from the time that you daven until Kiddush. So because we're doing that before Kiddush, we're fine, right? That's how we do it here Friday night. Chabad Palm Beach Gardens. Please join us for Friday night services at 5:30 p.m., where we start with an open bar. A small one, but it's an open bar. Just to see a comment coming in here. Dan says, good morning, Melissa. I do Kiddush over wine after the candles. That's right. Then I say Kiddush over bread after washing hands. That's perfect. That's how I do it too. Why don't we do wine and bread? Dan is asking. We don't do wine and bread. We do wine and bread. No, I was only saying if you don't have wine and you're making Kiddush and bread because you don't have wine, let's say, Dan, you told me once you were in a restaurant somewhere and you make Kiddush in the restaurant. But let's say they didn't have kosher wine in the restaurant. What are you going to do? You can't make Kiddush on non-kosher wine. So you get some kosher bread and you make Kiddush on the bread. BYOB, bring your own bread. Right? Okay. So that's Havdalah, right? And likewise, it's the law of the sages to recite Havdalah at its departure of a wine or some other drink, which is an accepted beverage in their region, and it's forbidden to taste anything before Kiddush or Havdalah. I want you to realize that saying Kiddush and Havdalah is not like a rabbi thing. It's an obligation. It's mitzvah number 19 in the Torah, to sanctify the Shabbos verbally. So you have to do. Through the prophets, we were commanded two further mitzvahs, namely to delight and honor. You're supposed to have delight on Shabbos, and you're supposed to have honor for the Shabbos. What does that mean? The prophet Isaiah says, "And call the Shabbos a delight, the holy day of Hashem." And honor, we know in the Torah, it says another verse that says something about honoring. Oh no, sorry, this verse in Isaiah. I'm sorry. This verse says both. Call the Shabbos a delight, the holy day of Hashem, honor. So what does it mean to honor the Shabbos, and what does it mean to delight in the Shabbos? I see you're thinking. What does it mean to delight in the Shabbos? Pleasurable experiences.
In other words,
one honors it by washing his face and hands with warm water and by putting on clean clothing. So the way you honor the Shabbos is that you dress for Shabbos. In the same way you dress for a wedding. You don't just rock up at a wedding in your shorts and t-shirt and your flip-flops. You take a shower, you get dressed, right? So that's how you come into Shabbos. What?
I mean, that's my pet peeve here. I mean, people come on Shabbos here, blue jeans, sandals.
They come during the week that way.
During the week, okay, but Shabbos. I agree with, well, look at us, I mean, but on Shabbos, that's the whole.
At least they're wearing pants.
What?
At least they're wearing pants.
Well, they're holy. You only have half.
Look, I'll tell you what. We're all on a journey. Honoring the Shabbos. We're learning about it right now. Here we are. We're learning about it. There's a guy, we learned about 3 years ago. There's a guy in our shul. Larry, if you remember Larry, he comes in the morning sometimes. We learned about 3 years ago that when you daven standing before God, you're supposed to wear a jacket. In the same way that you wouldn't show up to the president without a suit, right? Depends on the president, right? In the same way you wouldn't show up before somebody important without it, being dressed. So you don't stand before God without a jacket. Every time he comes to shul now, he davens, he wears a jacket. It's very interesting. But when we learn about it, you get into it, right? And Corey says to you, Rob, don't get me started. She agrees with you about this particular point.
I think with some people, and I'm not judgmental on this, it's almost cultural. I mean, like Israelis, for example.
Yeah, the sandals, that's a thing. For the Israelis, yeah.
And depending where they came from.
I think also talking in shul is part of that culture, right?
They may not, it might be very
Well,
kid.
especially
And you know what? It's good to hear on Shabbos.
See, that's the way I see it, Harvey. I'm with you. The way I see it is, I see it as I'm grateful that they're here on Shabbos as opposed to somewhere else that they might have been, right? So that's how we take it. It's like the famous story of Rabbi Yitzchak of Raditchev, the Mechutin of the Alter Rebbe. He says, He was an advocate of the Jewish people. He always saw the cup half full. So one time, when you say the Shema, you're supposed to cover your eyes. Why do you cover your eyes when you say the Shema? Concentration, right? So imagine he sees a Jew who's, while he's saying the Shema, he's greasing the wheels of his wagon. You want to slap him up. Hello, why do you think you cover your eyes, right? So what happened was that when somebody criticized this Jew, he said, Master of the universe, look how devoted your children are. Even while he oils the wheels of his wagon, even then he says Shema. Amazing. There's another great story here, another good story I want to share with you about realizing, about das, realization. We know things in Bina, but do we realize them is the big question. That's what today's JLI class is about. So there was I think it was the Chafetz Chaim himself who's the author of this book. The Chafetz Chaim is the author of this book, the concise book of mitzvahs. I believe he himself was a guest at someone's table once. And the host of the home welcomed the Chafetz Chaim to his house. And we cover the challah, right? We cover the challah. And you make the Kiddush while the challah is covered. Something was wrong with the food, maybe something was burning. And in front of the Chafetz Chaim, this host ridiculed his wife. He embarrassed his wife. Something about the food burning, something wasn't right. So the Chafetz Chaim turned to him and he says, have you ever wondered why we cover the challah? Why do we cover the challah? Well, one reason is, by the way, because it reminds us of the manna in the desert, which came double portion on Shabbos, and the manna was gift wrapped from God. There was a layer of dew below and a layer of dew above. It was nice, freshly packaged, which is the white tablecloth we put in the Shabbos table beneath the challah, and a beautiful white tablecloth above to cover the challah. Right? But another reason is because you're not supposed to, we don't embarrass the mitzvah. We don't want to jump to the wine and make the challah feel left out. So we cover the challah like it's not looking when we do the Kiddush, and then we uncover the challah to bless the challah. So says the Chafetz Chaim to this Jew, if we're careful not to embarrass the inanimate challah, don't you think we should be careful to not embarrass our spouses? Right? Here you are, you're so meticulous about Shabbos, you're so careful to say the words, you're so religious. Are you as religious with other people's feelings? We're so careful about what comes into our mouths. Is it this kosher? Is it that kosher? Was it watched by a Jew? Was it who was looking? Who wasn't looking? Right? If a Gentile looks at the wine, it's not kosher. If a Jew is not looking at the milk, then it also isn't kosher. But are you careful with are you as careful with what comes out of your mouth, or that doesn't need a kosher certification? Anything comes out of our mouth is harmless because it's just air. No, words will kill you. We tell our kids, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt you. Babemaisis. Babemaisis, because words will sink ships. Loose lips will sink ships, and you can take down a world. You can destroy someone's life with words. So whoever made that up is babemaisis. We said our kids the other way around. Words will break my bones, but sticks and stones won't hurt me. What's the significance of the 18 minutes? The 18 minutes is twilight. The reason for that is because it's twilight. Twilight is the unknown, is the time when we're not sure if it's day or night. Now, this is kind of complicated because actual twilight, you're not allowed to light Shabbos candles in. It's what's called a safek de'iraisa l'chumra, a biblical doubt where we have to go strict. When you have a rabbinical doubt, you go lenient. When you have a biblical doubt, you go strict. So because it's a question of, am I violating the Shabbos or not? During twilight, by lighting the candles, we say you can't light during twilight. Twilight actually begins technically 18 minutes after the time on our calendar. Well, what I told you is sunset is really twilight. But I'm telling you it's sunset because for all practical purposes, we can't light Shabbos candles anymore. Right? But in order to make a guard to the mitzvahs, a guardrail like you would in a highway. You don't tell people don't drive off the cliff at the edge of the cliff. You tell them 20 feet before the cliff. You say don't go over here, right? Same thing. It's a guardrail. We do the same amount, which is twilight, 18 minutes. We do it before sunset to give you a guard, like a cushion, so you don't violate. Okay. I think Winston's asking, can someone take a shower with soap on Shabbos? The answer is no. Washing hands with soap. You're not allowed to take a shower with soap on Shabbos. The reason is because you can't use hot water on Shabbos. That's the problem. The problem is you can't turn on the hot water. Why? Because turning on the hot water is lighting a fire. And even if, so for example, if you have let's say a gas, if you have a hot water heater, right? Well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this thing.
When you turn that on.
What happens when you take water out of the boiler? What happens?
Here it go right up.
Cold water goes into the boiler, and you're cooking the cold water that just entered the boiler. That's what you're doing. So even though the water that you're using right now is technically already hot, maybe before Shabbos, and that's okay, when you allow more cold water to go into the hot water and cooking the hot water, now you're cooking. So by opening the hot water sink, the faucet, you're actually cooking the cold water. What you are allowed to do is to have an urn of hot water before Shabbos. That's what we do. And you take out the hot water, but no cold water goes in. So that's fine. But it's something like an Instahot you can't use on Shabbos because the Instahot has new water flowing in all the time, right? Even what's it called? The what are they called? The Instahot showers. You know, the water heaters, the tankless water heaters. Even them, whether it's gas or electric, either way, there's cold water flowing through, and it just gets heated quickly. But it's inside. No, you don't have to turn it off. You just don't use it.
But we have a 75-gallon tank.
Take a hot shower.
What?
Because your hot water heater, you can take several, depends on what size of hot water you have. But you're not using it.
Now there's a separate prohibition. So you're saying if you turn off your hot water heater, then the water's not gonna be hot.
No,
Will be, well, what stays in the boiler, which
no, you turn off the water to go into.
Oh, if you close the faucet of the water going into the boiler, let's say. Now here you're running into another problem. It's not a problem of it's not. You're supposed to have pleasure in Shabbos, like we're learning now. The problem here now is that there's a problem of now this becomes a rabbinical decree that you're not allowed to take a hot shower on Shabbos in a permissible way because you might come to looking for more water, and then you'll open the faucet. That's a rabbinical fence to the Torah. By the way, many Hasidim go to the mikvah on Shabbos morning. Every day they go to the mikvah, and that's a hot mikvah. It's a hot mikvah, which is kind of like a bath, but it's you go quick, you go in and you go out. That's for the purposes of purification that you're allowed to do, but you're not allowed to take like a pleasurable shower, which is the context of what Steve was talking about. Pleasure in Shabbos you're allowed, but a pleasurable shower is a rabbinical prohibition, which the rabbis prevented because you probably will come or likely will come to needing to add more water. Okay, let's go back to. But just to answer your question, Winston. So you're not allowed to take a hot shower on Shabbos. Spoke about that. You are allowed to use soap if it's liquid. You can't use the bar soap because what you're doing is that you're changing the form from a solid to a liquid. That would be considered one of the 39 kinds of Shabbos labor. But you are allowed to use liquid soap on Shabbos. What is Rabbeinu Tam's sunset? That's really much more complex. Rabbeinu Tam was the grandson of Rashi, whose tefillin is what I use, a second pair of tefillin. He had a different calculation of nightfall, and his sunset is later than the regular timefall. So many Hasidim, not Chabad, but many Hasidim will go by the Rabbeinu Tam's sunset, and they'll actually keep Shabbos for like an extra hour. On the beginning of Shabbos, they don't do that, but at the end of Shabbos, they'll be more stringent, and they'll daven mincha. You know, mincha is supposed to daven until nightfall, not after nightfall. But they would daven mincha even after it's dark outside, because of Rabbeinu Tam's nightfall. What it's got to do with is the curvature of the earth. So the earth is a ball, right? If I'm at the top of the ball, when is sunset? When I can no longer see the sun, or remember, there's a curvature of the earth, right? Or when, because the earth is a ball, does sunset end at this plane of latitude or whatever, or this plane of latitude? Because it depends on. Of course, they knew that. It's in the Talmud. Galileo knew the earth was round, right? And he was killed for that, right? Is that him or Newton? The church did not believe that the earth is round, and they actually killed people for that belief, heretical belief they called it. But the Talmud, it says the earth is round. We knew that ages ago, 2,000 years ago. Science is catching up. Don't worry about it. It's still catching up. Plenty more to go, but they're covering ground. We're doing well. Keep it up. Okay, so let me wrap it up here. So how do you honor and pleasure the Shabbos? One honors it by washing his face and hands with warm water and by putting on clean clothing. You should have clothes prepared for Shabbos. And we spoke about in another place that what do you wear when Mashiach comes? According to one opinion, what you'll wear is what you wore in Shabbos. One opinion is what you were buried in. Another one is what you wore in Shabbos. If you hung out on the beach on Shabbos, then you'll be kind of underdressed for the party. So that's what you'll notice. The Chabad will wear the Prince Alfred tuxedo, which is the long black frock, right? It's a very regal Russian aristocracy kind of clothing. We'll wear that on Shabbos because that is how we honor the Shabbos, with the special clothing. You're supposed to have special stuff that you wear on Shabbos, right? Like, for example, I'll wear a tie primarily on Shabbos because it's an honor of the Shabbos. Yeah, well, it depends. In Florida, it's more challenging. But I want to highly encourage you to consider wearing special clothes for Shabbos. Buy a suit for Shabbos. Make this my Shabbos suit. You know, he makes it the delight. Same thing with holidays. Same thing. It's a similar concept. He makes it a delight by having enjoyable food and drink. So honor is clothing, washing, and a delight is enjoyable food and drink. So you're supposed to have extra special food for Shabbos. I got to tell you, walking into the kitchen on Friday afternoon, and if you remember your mother's houses, your bubby's houses, or your wife's houses, you walk in Friday afternoon, there's nothing like it. It's incredible. My mother's house, I still dream of the Jerusalem kugel and the special cigars that she made out of like puff pastry. It was, and then the special kind of pickle that we had, the Israeli awesome pickle. I'm watering. My mouth's watering. Yeah, my wife has her own stuff, you know, but
My mom used to burn boiling water.
You know what they're making around here mostly? Reservations.
Oh, reservations. You know, I was in Bell Harbor last week for Shabbos. There's about 16 or 18 kosher restaurants in Bell Harbor. It's unbelievable what goes on over there. And each one is better than the next. Expensive, but really good. And most of them are open on Shabbos. The way it works is that there's no payment to happen on Shabbos, like in Venice. Venice has the same thing. You want to eat in Venice, kosher, you better make yourself a reservation before Shabbos. And there's no payment. In fact, in Venice, it's an honor system. You come for your reservation and you figure it out after Shabbos or before Shabbos. But the way they do it in Bell Harbor, you prepay and you have your reservation. You at the 5:30 seating, at the 7:30 seating, whatever seating, and they serve you. The food is all
Who's serving you? Jews?
no, we have Gentiles, but there's a mashgiach and it's all kosher and everything good.
I understand, but they're working. I thought you can't have you can't make a guy work for you on.
They're not cooking for you. The food is cooked before Shabbos. That's not considered work. That's a Jew can do that too. It's not considered work. Wow, it's late. Let me wrap it up here, guys. But I have to tell you, these restaurants, unbelievable. Hey, really
We
unbelievable.
don't even have a single one.
We're working on it. Anybody has an ideas, we would love to open one. There is a duty to have 3 meals on the Shabbos, and the more one spends for the Shabbos, the more praiseworthy he is. The more money you spend for Shabbos, the better. But this means within his capacity. By the way, it says that of how much money you're going to make is determined on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, not including the money you're going to spend on Shabbos and Yontif. The expenses of Shabbos and Yontif, they don't come from that allocation. They get reimbursed directly. Whoever makes the Shabbos a delight will be given a boundless heritage and will be granted his heart's wishes, and he will be saved from the servitude of foreign powers. I'm going to stop over here, and we'll continue hopefully tomorrow. But say that, everybody. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody. Shalom. Thank you.